To give a short introduction of the panel, so today's panel consists of Winnie Johannessen, who is with us online. She's a professor in corporate communication from Aarhus University. After Winnie, we will hear from Catherine Torp. She's the Director of Communication and Strategy at the Revisorenverenigingen in Norway. Then we will hear from Mona Solvol and Maria Isaacson, both associate professors at BI, Norwegian Business School. Then it will be followed by Kia Herring, the Vice President of Global Communications and Sustainability at, if I say that correctly, you might correct me, Tieto Every. We will hear more from that. And then finally, my name is Suzanne van Gils. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Communication and Culture, and I will host the webinar today. All right, so part of the reasoning behind organizing this webinar is to have a moment to reflect a little bit on all those societal challenges and all the learnings we have from the pandemic we have just come out of, but also like very clearly like a vision towards the future, right? So for many organizations, we have come back to business, and there's now the question of what are we going to do with the next wave of challenges that might come towards us, and what are the skills that communicators need to meet those challenges. So on the one hand, what have we learned? And on the other hand, like what do we need for the future? So to hear more about that, we will go through the following agenda. So first of all, Winnie will tell us something about the role of communication managers and whether actually the current times are actually communicators, time to shine. And that will be followed by Catherine Torp, and then there's space for audience questions. So both the audience in the room and also for those of you online, you have the opportunity to ask questions to Catherine and Winnie, and we will have a discussion going. And then we will have a second section that is the presentation by Mona and Maria on learnings about crisis communication on the COVID pandemic, and they will present recent research, followed by a presentation by Kia and another round of discussions, and then we will close the session. All right, so with that, I would invite Winnie to start the presentation. Winnie, I will stop sharing and then you can share your slides if you like.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I would have loved to be in that room and to get a croissant and a cup of coffee. But as you may know, I am in Aarhus sitting at my office. But I would like to share a couple of slides with you. So let me start by doing that. Yeah, here they come. Because for the next 10 minutes, I will, let me just see, I will do it like that. I will talk about the current societal challenges, but also the golden age of communicators. Is this actually a moment for us to stand up and to show our value? I think so. So let me try to explain why. And let me see if I can make it work. I can, super. Now, first of all, if I look at the society that we're living in right now, I would say that we're living in an age of interferences, meaning people are interfering a lot with business, and we need to be aware of this. So what are the characteristics? Well, first of all, I would say with the internet and the digitalization, we are now experiencing what is called a cobra technology. You know, a cobra, it's a snake, and the internet is like a cobra, you know, suddenly it hits us, and you never know when. Whereas in the good old days, if you looked at the media, that was a kind of a python snake, you know, slowly eating a company if there was an issue or a problem of any kind. So I think we need to be aware of this. So what is happening? Well, we talk about risk society with Ulrich Beck, network society, you know, that we have a lot of connectivity with Manuel Castells. We talk about fake news, misinformation, disinformation, etc. So it's all centered around digitalization, or a lot of it. So there is a new communicative power balance, and this is increasing the risk of issues, criticism, and crisis. And all these elements lead to what I would call an internal pace of changes that has become quite high. Organizations need to change and adapt the whole time, and that's complicated. The communication processes have changed. They are now becoming phenomena where multiple actors interfere and put up their own agenda. And that's why I name it an age of interferences. We have more and more interventions from third parties intervening in the business and the communication of companies. For instance, a third party can be a politician profiting from a crisis to you know, put out his own or her own agenda. NGOs, activist groups, citizens, and what we call unauthorized actors. For instance, hackers, critiques, trolls, etc. They appear. Up in the corner, you can see a small Danish book, Kan trold tæmmes, and troll here is the word for an ogre. But you know, trolling means to get somebody to bite the bait. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of trolls out there just finding it fun to interfere when there is an issue to do that for. So I would claim, or I think, that the new normal actually would be issues and crisis management, that we need to constantly work with some of the tools and elements from within this field. Take a look at our world. It's in constant change. Constantly new issues are coming up. Just to name a few of them: Me Too, anti-racism, abortion debates in the US, diversity issues, cyber attacks, data misuse, pandemics, creating lockdowns, layoffs, bankruptcies, and a lot of problems to especially small and medium-sized companies. We have climate changes and sustainability issues, and they are changing the market conditions and the consumers. Look at things like flight shame, meat shame, slow consumption. You know, the whole fast fashion industry is now trying to go into slow consumption. The war in Ukraine, economic crisis, inflation, energy issues, as we are experiencing is right now. And what is important here is that communication is actually key to deal with some of these issues. So that's why I claim that these are points in time where the competences of communication professionals are highly needed and most valued. Now, what can we do then as a company? Well, as we have seen it, organizations, their CEOs, and also staff employees may take on new roles. They try to act as corporate citizens, you know, with corporate social responsibility towards community, society, environment, etc. But we also see more and more of them stepping up, becoming a kind of a corporate activist, doing brand activism, and even becoming politicians, I would say, within foreign policy. Nowadays, they even need to take a political stance. We didn't see that 5-10 years ago. We may see CSR and sustainability issues, but not like today, where companies actually are acting as politicians. And they are also acting as chief engagement officers, the CEOs, for instance, on social media. That is new as well. However, this can be quite risky, especially if you're not aware of communication, because communication, again, is really key to this. It can be risky because you risk a lot of failures as well. If you go in as a brand activist, you risk criticism. So it is important to be relevant to people, but also to know that there are people out there who don't like what you're doing. And for instance, for the political stances, you will always have opponents trying to, you know, contradict what you are actually doing. So that is why within crisis management, we are working with a theory named rhetorical arena theory. And visually, I have tried to put it up like this, that when we have an issue, when there is a societal challenge, voices start communicating about this. Some of them communicate to and with one another, supporting the ideas. Others are against or even past, or just talk about one another in the arena. And what is important here is that not all these voices want dialogue and consensus. No, some of them actually don't want consensus. And that can be quite difficult to deal with. And that's why the keywords here would be communicative complexity. We are so much dependent on what are the other voices doing in the arena. So if we go out as a company, putting up a campaign for sustainability issues or taking a political stance, what will be the reaction of other people in that arena? So we need to be able to anticipate what will the others be doing. You know, just like when we are playing a game of chess, we need to anticipate. So when we communicate, let's put us into the place of the others in order to anticipate what will then be going on. Today, we are witnessing a lot of polarization, and this is quite risky. For instance, if you take the issue with the abortion laws in the US, you had companies going out, for instance, pharmaceutical companies like Novo Nordisk in Denmark went out supporting their employees if they want to have an abortion in another state than where the headquarters is located in the US. That's risky business, because you may also have employees, or you may have people out there who support the Republicans in their vote for these abortion laws. So every time we take a stance, we risk this kind of polarization. And for the consensus issues, well, in Aarhus at the moment, we have Danish Crown, you know, who are doing within meat production, so to say. And in front of their door, they have an activist group, the vegans, wanting to get rid of that company completely. So how can they go into a dialogue if somebody don't want that dialogue with you? So that's why it's important to know how to navigate in this arena. And the communication professional is the one to act strategically as a counselor. And we need to have an eye for this communicative complexity, both internally and externally, online and offline. And we need to combine, you know, communication planning with an emergent approach to what we are dealing with. So the keywords, and these are keywords from coming in from crisis management, and that's why I say that knowing to deal with this is the new normal. So signal detection, we need to detect what is coming up. Strategic listening is enormously important. Anticipation, resilience, to be able to bounce back when we are in a crisis, to grasp the opportunities and innovate. Contingency, it always depends on the context. Context matters. And finally, learning about digital communication management. So the keywords here would be the symbolic and the social capital, but that will also lead to the economic capital of a company. So reputation, trust, and legitimacy are keywords. So to end this, the golden age of communication, communicators' time to shine. While if we look at the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a high recognition of the value of communication. And this is really nice to see. We had a small survey in Denmark where here are some of the quotes. The communication department has been brought closer to top management due to a situation where communication turned critical. The eyes rest on the communication department during uncertainty and crisis. And we have learned how much we can achieve with communication. And this result is actually supported by the Nordic Communication Report that we launched just a couple of weeks ago by NORA. You find it on the NORA webpage. Here, communicators from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland confirmed that they actually felt that their work was very much valued and recognized. So this is nice to know. So what should we do in order to stick to this golden age? Well, we need to be part of decision making. We need to know about core businesses and digitalization, how to deal with new internal pace of changes, but also to overcome the difficulty of attracting attention of stakeholders in this new world. And finally, to be a strategist when dealing with issues, crises, and other societal challenges. I did put up a piece of advice. Take a look at it, because I'm sure you can get back to these slides, because I know my time is out. So I will stop sharing and let's move over to Catherine Torp. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Winnie. That was very interesting. Would you like to present from your own computer? I think from this computer, actually. Yeah. I have it open
there.
This one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for an interesting presentation, Winnie. That was really, really good to hear. We are now kind of switching to Catherine's slides. I will share here. There we go. Yeah, just a little bit more conviction. All right.
Where the camera is. Ah, there
Camera
we
is
are.
here, so we can actually, if you stand back a little bit. All right, I'll give you the floor. You can use the pointer if you like.
Thanks a lot. And thank you, Winnie, because you actually touched upon some of the things that I wanted to talk about as well, because I see the trust in business as an opportunity, but it also puts a lot of claims on us. So how should we act to earn that trust? And as you said, the world is really in a dire strait at the moment. We have a lot of different issues, climate, war, etc., and trust is declining. I'm showing you a slide from the Edelman Trust Barometer. It shows that actually the government and media is losing ground, and that puts the business side of the equation into a different position than before. And it also puts communicators into a different position than before, because actually the most trusted actors previously are not successful in containing trust. So what has happened? And that is, there is a lot of theories of what has happened with trust, why government doesn't work anymore, and why the kind of globalization promise hasn't worked really for people either. And I'm not going to go into lengthy theories about it, but I think there is a declining trust and polarization that has stemmed from something that we don't talk about that often, but I think it's part of the reason why. It's better to be born rich than smart. And we have a society also in Norway and in the US, when you think that you go to college, you go to the university because you have merited to get there. In Norway, that might be true. But even in Norway, it's such that if your parents are educated, you are much more likely to go to the university than if your parents didn't go to the university themselves. That's still true in Norway. In the US, only 5% of the 25 lower income groups go to the university. 80% come from middle and upper society. So there is an inequality, and we don't address it properly. And I think that might be some of the reasons why trust has become such an issue and why polarization becomes an issue, because we are not delivering on our promises. And we also have a lot of research showing that many people in many of the rich countries like the US, Japan, etc., they believe that they will be less well off in 5 years than they are today. And that's a serious issue, and we don't talk about it that much. And we don't talk about it in Norway even, where I think that actually, if you look at the average student at BI, most of them would have parents with higher education. Why? It's open for everyone. And in Norway, it's not an economical issue. And then we also have what stakeholders expect from us. They expect increasingly that we deliver on our promises. So this is from the Edelman Trust Barometer again. I just wanted to, because I know that this research is quite well known, but you also have a lot of other research supporting those facts that 6 out of 10 people, they actually choose their brands based on values. They think that belief and value is more important than price and other aspects. Sustainability is more and more important, as Winnie also said. Even when it comes to fast-moving consumer goods, we look at the more sustainable companies. So this is an opportunity for us as well. We have the challenges, and the list is a lot longer. But when you're working with communications, you often rely on earned channels like the media, the mainstream media, but they become more and more difficult to reach, and the journalists, their knowledge becomes more, what should I say? Less journalists have time to really deep dive into issues. And we also meet a lot of fake news and conspiracy theories that makes it difficult to be heard when you come with facts. And then how do you communicate ambiguity? Nothing is ever easy. There are always nuances to everything that you're talking about. So what I think for us as a profession, so to say, we can take a role. And if you manage to understand and always relate to the fact that to be a trusted stakeholder, you need always to be fact-based. You need always to make sure that you never take your trust for granted, that there is always quality in what you say. And I think I represent a profession that is actually verifying that other actors are telling the truth. We are verifying that business, the numbers that they put forward financially are correct. And we are also going to do that when it comes to sustainability. So we can claim our niche, we can make fact reliable. So, and I think that goes for many kinds of business that I know. DNV Jill is here today, and DNV is also from the technical side. They are proving that the companies are doing the right things, which are really important. And I think there is a new aspect that maybe the more technical side of business hasn't spent that much time on, and that is kind of being authentic and value-based. Facts doesn't work alone. You also need to show beliefs and values that people can believe in and relate to. And I think that the combination of this can make you provide facts and values to the public discussion that makes you a trusted stakeholder, and that will improve the public discussion, I think. And then to the last point, and Winnie also touched upon it, don't trust your instinct, measure everything, because everything moves and everything is different from what you think. And I'm having a lot of fun with, driver analytics and factor analytics, and statistics is very important in communication, and it becomes increasingly so as the world becomes more complex. So that was a short version.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I will stop sharing the screen, but if you have a moment, you stay up here with me, because we have some time for questions from the audience to Winnie and Katrina, or questions to each other. If you like. So is there anybody in the audience with questions?
Yes.
Hello, Winnie. I would like to learn just a bit more about strategic listening. What defines it as strategic, and how can you know in advance, how to be strategic with a new in a new meeting with a new, let's say, partner or a new public? What does it mean strategic here?
Yeah.
To listening.
Yeah.
Concept. I'm sort of thrilled about it.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I would say that strategic listening has become the new mantra within communication research right now. New books are coming out and a lot of new studies. And what do they say? Because you have listening and then you have strategic listening. And strategic listening means that you deliberately, as a company, want to put up tools so that you can actually be able to listen to people. I mean, you can do it internally, listening to employees, we know that, but externally as well. You can set it up. And what does it mean to listen then? Well, it means to actually be prepared to change. It means to be prepared to put yourself in the place of somebody else in order to really know and to learn what they think about your company or what they think about you as a manager if it's internally in a company. And we have been so bad at listening, we are not using this. And to put it up means, for instance, to use the digital tools that we have to not only talk to a customer who is complaining, but also try to really listen to that customer, to find out what's behind it. And so it's closely linked to what I have called signal detection as well. And we know, for instance, from crisis management, that in 75% of all crises, there were signals beforehand that something was wrong. So by using strategic listening, meaning being ready to change by listening to your stakeholders in various ways, you can actually, get this signal detection and become a clever and smarter company. But it means you have to work on it. You have to put up, where are the moments where we can actually listen to people? For instance, if you look inside a company, it's when new people come in and old people are leaving. Because when people are leaving a company, they dare say all the things that they were neutral about beforehand, and new people coming in say, oh, why are you handling this like this? Don't you see that there's a problem here? So, I mean, so employees, but also customers, NGOs, you must listen to them, even if you do not agree what they're actually saying and doing. So I think that's the way forward. I hope this was an answer to your question.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to build on what you're saying, because when we try to listen to our stakeholder, which is the population of Norway, basically, they are their area of interest is different from what we think. And really taking that in and acting on it. For example, values is a lot more important than just the facts, whereas I come from a kind of fact-based profession, and we need to take that into account, and we need to communicate with our stakeholders in a different manner than we usually did.
There's a question by Alex.
Yeah, wonderful. Katrine, thanks for the very, very interesting presentation there. And I really was intrigued by one of your take-home messages about helping organizations to become an expert, right? To deal with trust by focusing on expertise. And I find that interesting for two reasons. One, because I think it's a bit of an ambivalent point, because sometimes we as experts, we are really frustrated by expertise maybe counting less and less sometimes, right? So do we really have a lack of experts? Or is trust also in experts or expertise declining, right? That's one thing I'm sort of halfway the point, but that doesn't mean that expertise is not a good strategy. And we know that from research looking at profiles from comms departments, that apart from other targets like building reputation or trust, that this developing thought leadership for their organization is actually underutilized, I mentioned, for many departments. Like they could do a lot more. So what are some strategies or some pathways to build thought leadership for organizations, how to actually get there, to develop expertise? That you have some anecdotes, experiences on that.
Can I repeat the question for like the people online, like in a nutshell? So the question to Katrine is like on the one hand, do you feel that the trust in communicators and
In the expertise.
in the
yeah.
expertise is declining? And what are some strategies to build that?
And also build on the thought leadership. What was Alex? Yes, I think that building thought leadership and expertise only based on facts, it is no longer possible, because experts are also being challenged. It's because we don't want to listen to experts anymore. We want to listen to the ordinary people. And this is why I think you need to couple it with kind of values and who are you and who's your core identity, and you need to talk about more than just the facts in order to be listened to. I have research that shows that researchers' credibility has increased, at least in Norway, during the COVID, because we're yes, because we're talking a lot about research. And we have during this period, but expert has become less trusted. That's correct. So how to deal with that? And that is because people have stopped trusting government. They have stopped trusting media. They have stopped trusting a number of the kind of usual channels for trustworthy information. And as communicators, you need to try to understand this and find a path through that distrust. And I believe that values are a big part of it.
Thank you.
That's really great.
Can I maybe add just a short comment to that? Because Alex, you were also talking about thought leadership. And I think if you look into issues management, thought leaderships, the companies who have thought leadership are the companies who have courage, who dare launch themselves into something new. So as you said, Katrine, if you have a new value, show it as well, take the lead. And that was why it was interesting, for instance, with the abortion thing in the US, you actually saw companies launching themselves into that, knowing that that would create critiques, but also that would make the trust go up. Whoa, they're actually walking the talk.
Yeah, those are some very interesting points. Do you have like any reflections on how to balance? Because on the one hand, I think the point of saying, well, you have to measure everything, right? So we have to build on like science. We have to build on research. We have to build on data. It needs to be measured. Do you have some ideas on how you will treat all that data? Because we also know that whatever you put in the beginning of that equation, with all the fake news being out there, with all the data not being that trustworthy anymore, what are your reflections on that? Because ultimately you could also end up measuring the wrong thing.
Absolutely, it's a very, very, very valid point. And statistics is really, really interesting, and it makes you feel very comfortable if you can kind of, you can narrow it down to decimals, but you can't. You're perfectly right. So you always need to add kind of your kind of overall perspective. For example, we just launched a membership survey. I have the numbers, I have the drivers, I have everything, and I'm spending my evenings reading all the qualitative comments, because that will create an aspect of what our members think that the numbers will never tell me. Yeah. So you need to talk with people as well.
Yes.
Yeah. If I should add to that one, coming back to strategic listening, let's imagine you want to really be a strategic listener. The downside of this, is that you get too many data. There's too much out there, and there will be a lot of noise that you actually don't need. And it will cost resources to do that strategic listening. So again, we need to tiptoe to find out, by learning, where do we actually get the valued information that we want to do. So I fully agree. We know that from relationship marketing. They have been working with this for 30 years, I think, collecting data online on their customers. But are they using that data? No. And very often it's because they are not measuring it or taking it into account in an appropriate way. So we need to deal with that. And that's where digitalization and measurement comes in. It's very important.
Great. Are there any questions of the audience that you can participate in the discussion through the Q&A? Or any questions of anybody else in the room?
Okay. I think we can go to the next part of the session.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much for this part.
With pleasure.
All right, then I would like to invite Maria and Mona to join us over here, and I will start up your presentation.
You have a pointer too?
Yeah, we have a pointer. Just share. Technology, that's wonderful. All right, so you will be in the range of the video of your stand about here, so let me get a little bit back. A little bit back, yeah. And then I will get out of your screen, and here's your.
Okay, see how it works.
It's back. It's the other one. So
I know, but if I want to point at something.
yes,
Good. Hello, everyone. I'm starting this presentation. I'm Maria, and Mona will take over midway. We call our paper "The Rhetoric of the Norwegian Government and Health Authorities During the COVID-19 Pandemic." And we conducted a rhetorical study and analyzed 30 press conferences, and we selected 5 speakers. The Prime Minister, I'd like to point for those who do not know the Norwegian Prime Minister, she's here, Erna Solberg, the Minister of Health over here, and the Mayor of Oslo. He is not in the picture here. He became quite famous during the pandemic for different reasons and had an important role of managing Oslo. And the 2 research experts, we refer to them as representing the health authorities, is Camilla Stoltenberg on the picture here from the Research Institute. All the institutes and directorates are labeled Norwegian, long names. And finally, Espen Ropstad Nakstad, representing the Norwegian Health Directorate. So 3 politicians, 2 national ones, and 1 local, the Oslo mayor, and 2 health authorities, or we call them experts. We conducted the study between March 2020 at the outbreak and divided the phase of the 1 year, the 12 months, into 3 different phases. And we chose also 6 statements of each of the actors. Our theory is based on the philosopher Kenneth Burke. Maybe we can reduce the, Kenneth Burke, the man below in the picture, and his concept of identification. And that has been further developed by a later researcher, George Cheney, and who conducted a study on organizational discourse, developing certain identification strategies. We operationalized these 6 strategies, translating them into more sort of, let's say, popular versions of the meaning. And what we did, and we have now learned by now that conducting a rhetorical study, we have to spell out that it's a manual analysis of quite a lot of data. And we then identified these 6 strategies and coding them to and individually coding them first, Mona and I, and then discussing them and deciding on them, you know, went through the entire material. And per strategy, we also identified 2 themes within each strategy. The first strategy we refer to as ICU, and the second one, we belong together. We'll have examples of these so you get to know them more in depth. Together we create something new. It's a strategy of change. We belong together is a strategy of values. The first one, ICU, is more dialogical, identifying an audience. The fourth strategy, we struggle together, is yes, we are together, although we disagree. We stand together when we disagree, is sort of even further, let's say, explicit, more explicit than the former one in showing that this is real disagreement, as it turns out, between the Oslo mayor and the Minister of Health. And then the final strategy we call Together We Become Greater. It's a collaboration strategy. The first strategy, ICU, is the 3rd most used strategy with equal frequencies for politicians and health experts. The assistant director, I skipped the NDH, the assistant director, Espen Ropstad Nakstad, became very popular. He shows the highest frequencies in identifying certain audiences. The 2 themes within this strategy is concern, expressing empathy for and understanding with specific publics. For instance, clearly identifying young people, elderly, unemployed, those waiting for vaccination, and those who are lonely. Loneliness actually became a big issue towards the end of the pandemic. Also, another theme within this strategy is recognition, meaning recognizing citizens' efforts by expressing gratitude and praise, praising the audiences and the publics. The next strategy, we belong together, is the value strategy somehow. It's the least used strategy. The Minister of Health and the Assistant Director, the man in the picture, in the former picture, Espen Ropstad Nakstad, show the highest frequencies. And here we found what is very Norwegian, you know, the concept of dugnad. And within that concept, we refer to them as codes of conduct, where dugnad is a very central one. Giving commonsensical advice. The meter became very famous by the Minister of Health, who actually demonstrating the length of a meter in case people didn't know them. So sort of very basic ground rules that people can refer to. You know, these are old kärringrod. I don't know whether this makes sense to you. It's a Swedish sort of the, you know, what we really know from our parents, you know, when you're sick. So codes of conduct, giving commonsensical advice, the meter, washing your hands, staying at home. The Prime Minister articulates responsibility, common values, and calls for national voluntary work, the dugnad. She was the one who, in her first speech already in March, brought up the concept of dugnad and the tradition of dugnad in Norway. In her sort of elaboration of the dugnad, she became very explicit just before, let's say, Christmas and holidays, to communicate both hope and good news, in combination also with how many people can gather around a julebord, around a Christmas table. Okay, together we create something new. This is the change strategy, and it is the most used strategy by all actors, expresses change. The Oslo mayor shows most frequent use of this strategy. He's very insisting in his way of communicating and has dramatic calls to Oslo citizens. Oslo folk, you know, became very sort of a common way of addressing his audience. And what does the strategy consist of? New measures, usually. Social distancing, vaccination, quarantine, testing, to emphasize how well the government cooperates with the publics. And the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister show common sense appeals to change of behavior. You know, the more grave the pandemic develops, you know, so it actually implies change of behavior. The two health experts are more into controlled reopening when it comes to change, a smooth step-by-step plan to a new normal. Let's see. We struggle together. I think now it's Mona, your turn.
Yeah, it's my
yes,
turn.
that's right.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Mona, and
Great. See whether you're actually in the camera.
yeah, okay. Yeah. The strategy called "We Struggle Together" is the second most used strategy. It addresses division, threat, uncertainty. The director of the Institute of Public Health, Camilla Stoltenberg, shows the highest frequency in the use of this strategy. She addresses health threats to demonstrate her expertise, but it's quite interesting that she also emphasized uncertainty, and she's very open about how much they didn't know about the pandemic. The Prime Minister shows the second highest frequency in addressing a different type of threat, democratic threat. And she often talks about how the pandemic interfered with our everyday life and how it restricted our personal freedom and mobility. For instance, during these summer holidays and traveling restrictions. The next strategy is named "We Stand Together When We Disagree," and it refers to political conflicts, which is mostly used by the local politician in Oslo, as Maria mentioned, when he speaks of local versus national restriction measures and the vaccination program. He talks a lot about how unfair the program was. The strategy also refers to conflicts between politicians and health experts, and this is mostly used by Camilla Stoltenberg when she addresses disagreement concerning vaccination strategies. The other health expert, Nakstad, he doesn't use this disagreement strategy at all. This is not a much used strategy, but the use of the strategy increases during the period, and it's most frequent in the last phase of the pandemic. This is the last one. This is the last one. Together we become greater, which Maria said is a collaboration strategy. It is the least used strategy of them all. And we've seen that the Prime Minister uses solidarity when she appeals to collective efforts, the dugnad appeal. Nakstad, also in this case, uses common understanding to show respect and collaboration when he talks a lot about protection and risk avoidance. While the Minister of Health and Major Oslo, they have a different sub-strategy when they appeal to collective efforts and collaboration, but they name this more as a duty. So they're a bit more stricter in their communications.
Pointing sort of index.
Yeah. So to sum up, no. There it is. We find that the government's approach to cooperation and public health during the pandemic was rather successful. We think that all speakers come across as quite brave and engaged, pragmatic and inclusive, although they differ in the choice of strategy and themes. I think it's important to remember how special times this was, how much uncertainty was surrounded by their press conferences, and there was quite a lot of pressure on them. But what they did, that instead of toning down their differences, the different roles and positions and expertise fields and also different personalities, they managed to build their own individual crisis communication rhetoric, which we think gave all of them more credibility. And disagreement rhetoric reveals transparency about uncertainty we know from the pandemic. So by disclosing uncertainty, they show more trust. And this uncertainty is also balanced by strong identification with different publics. The speakers build on a clear we that appeals to collaboration and common efforts, but they also address specific sub-publics in the big public. If you want to know more, Maria and I'm happy to just reach out, and we're happy to tell you something more, or you can even read our article. It's available now and in the last issue of Journal of Communication Management. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we can stop sharing. So we will have a moment to ask you all the questions after the presentation of Kia Herring. Very interesting. Thank you so much. All right. Hello, Kia.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Welcome to the webinar. You're today's last panelist. I will give you the floor for your presentation, and you can share if you like.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Very good. So hello from Finland. I am Kia Herring and representing Tietoevry, which is a Nordic-based but very global company listed on the stock exchanges in Oslo, Stockholm, and Helsinki. And I'm actually talking from our Finnish headquarters here in Espoo. Good morning to everyone. I have around 24,000 colleagues globally, and we are a technology company. So what we say in brief is that we are the developers of digital futures. That's about the company. Let's move on. So we are living the era of moral economy. I find this term somewhere, and I truly like it. Someone here earlier was referring to Edelman Trust Barometer. These are the expectations that companies are facing coming across all of our stakeholders, customers, employees, the general public, all of them. And this, of course, have become very evident during the recent developments with the pandemic and now recently the war in Ukraine. So I'm going to talk about two communication approaches in this context that we at Tietoevry has sort of taken along. First perspective is that how do we utilize this for our long-term thought leadership building? How are we making ourselves relevant in this context? And obviously, I said the word long-term, so these are actually long-term themes for us, but we found a good way of being relevant, utilizing heavily these in the media context, but also from our content production machinery perspective overall. 360 degrees here, it's not the speed limit, it is actually the thinking that we try to think through across the different stakeholders. What is the relevant in this content piece? We talk about well-being and work-life balance, of course, that mostly inside the company, but when the sort of hybrid working guidelines and context was created, we also talked about that externally. Diversity and inclusion and gender balance ambitions is a big thing for us. It's more evident in some countries, for instance, in Finland. I can say that we are a thought leader in this. Not so much, we are amongst the sort of most advanced, I would say, in Sweden and Norway, but not the leading in a similar way. Cybersecurity, a very topical across the society at the moment, particularly now Finland and Sweden with the NATO applications. So this is an area heavily focused across all audiences. not the least from our customers' perspective. We talk more and more about data and new technology, and actually this data and new technology is also linking to how can we, with the technology, impact or mitigate the climate impact and work for the better for the environment. So just a few examples from our external or thought leadership building agenda. But what I wanted to talk about is also a very sort of topical matter and learnings from this time with the geopolitical crisis as the Russia attacked Ukraine. And we are the company having employees in both of these countries. We have more than 2,000 employees in Ukraine. And when the events began, we had around 100 employees in Russia, but we had actually quite long roots in being in Russia, more than 25 years as a company, mainly serving the Scandinavian or European companies in Russia. This is a timeline of the events. As we all recall, there was a sort of a military troops building up behind the borders for quite some time, but still the strength of the attack, I think it took all of us by surprise. A heavy communication activity was started immediately on the day when the war began. And what I'm particularly proud about to be able to state that it took us 1 week to go out with the announcement that we are exiting Russia. It was ethically not possible to continue that business. And quite in a few months' time, we also concluded it, and it was in a way, easy case for us. I mean, we didn't own factories in the country. It was knowledge workers. And at the end of the day, it turned out to be a management buyout. So the management, part of the management bought the company, continue the business with those clients who are still in Russia. And of course, there's a scarcity of IT professionals. So we are confident that there will be job for our former colleagues going forward as well. But what did we learn from these key activities and communicating across this very intense period and crisis that is actually still ongoing? So it's not over yet. First of all, I mean, unnecessary to say that continuous communication is crucial in crisis, but it was updates a couple of times a day for our internal audiences when the things really started. Of course, we catered for all different stakeholders, and what took us by surprise was actually the information hunger of the stakeholders not even directly impacted. I mean, we answered to our customers who didn't have anything to do with our business in Ukraine, but because we were the trustworthy news source company who actually had their feet on the ground. So it was so easy to come to us and ask for information. Also, media treated us. I mean, we were probably one of the biggest Nordic employers in Ukraine. So both in Norway and Finland, media was heavily excited about this. And something that we actually did as a decision from our team perspective is that we didn't offer proactively any stories around this. I mean, we got good empathic stories in media, both in Norway and in Finland, but it was my team members actually in Sweden who suggested that can we pitch this to media because it's such a good story. How company is taking care of the employees, but we decided no, this is not the way for us in this case. Furthermore, we had to revisit our normal policies. We need to be really adapt to the situation, and a couple of one concrete example was this keeping a reactive media approach. But the other very concrete as well, I mean, we are utilizing Workplace, which is a Facebook application for businesses for our internal communication and as an internal news channel. So anyone can basically create a new news group in that. And one morning there was a group called Russian Crimes. So of course, Russian Crimes doesn't sound like anything any corporation want to have in their communication channels. As the situation was far from normal, so of course I started softly, and I connected with the person who created that group to ask what the intentions were. And we actually agreed to keep it, but they had to change the name. So it was called, or it is still called, Ukrainian Views. But the people, colleagues in Ukraine, felt that they wanted to sort of ensure that they can speak out and they can share how they feel about the whole thing. And of course, it's voluntary. So those who want to follow their discussion are able to do it in this channel. We also agreed that we don't want to see any blood or any you know, extreme things as we get them in every news channel otherwise as well. But it turned out actually to be a good decision to not to sort of ask them to close this group, but to keep it open. And in this way, we have been avoiding this type of extreme opinions or views to be shared in every other news channel or news group that we have. And we have kept the Tieto Every news channel for the official company-wide information, which was, as said in the beginning, twice a day updates for everybody. And then the ones who are more eager going on dialogue and even, you know, sharing some propaganda could use this separate group. Moving on, so this communication channels of today and the digitalization overall provides excellent platform for radical transparency, and where also the strong emotions come across very, very clearly and immediately. And this, of course, had many positive and negative sides. I mean, we as communicators, it was easy for us to have our finger on the pulse constantly, to see that what is the sentiment amongst our employees and how should we continue the dialogue with them. And also we could see signs of corporate racism showing their face. So let's be very open and honest about that. There were strong emotions involved between the people in Ukraine, and then of course blaming even colleagues in Russia being guilty because if they didn't do protest, if they didn't sort of object publicly everything the government and leadership in the country are doing, it was seen as a hypocrisy, and the company's standpoint was very much challenged. And going back to where I started, so I'm extremely happy that we were so quick with our exit Russia announcement, so that the things did come out after that. But it only pointed out, I mean, the role of the companies in this type of societal matters. So it is not okay to say anymore that we don't take a stance. We have to take a stance. And we as a company did that by announcing the exit from Russia. What also came very evident is that the normal sort of corporate tidied language is not good enough. I mean, we had to call a war a war. It was not a conflict or a crisis. It was a war. And this type of sentiment builds a good bridge to what we can see the role of communications in this era of moral economy developing. So reflecting on the post-pandemic and also this war in Ukraine. So I strongly feel that we as a communication function have been and will be at the very core of the events and truly a strategic partner to the top leadership. And how it is visible, it is exactly that we need to reflect the changing context. I mean, whether it's about making company relevant for external world or reflecting the sentiment within the company and guiding the top management to interpret the situations. They might have the top view in terms of what's going on in our customers' mind. but do they have a view of the sentiment of the employees or the general public at all times? So I think we are the bridge in that perspective. And what we also learned is that the tonality of the messages and how to conduct the dialogue is extremely important. And here we have a big role to play. I mean, we did spend a lot of time thinking through the messages, and we need to go back and update. I refer to this talking about the conflict or crisis instead of a war. So we had to learn that the hard way, that there's no way our chief executive officer can avoid using the word war when it's a war. And now we know that going forward. And of course, going back to this more longer term thinking, so I think it's a sort of there are risks, as somebody was referring to, talking about the societal issues, particularly when there's a crisis ongoing, but there's also great benefits. So if the company is brave enough, if the corporate citizenship is lived up to, or even being an activist in some points, you need to prepare to face for the criticism, but there's also a lot to be gained if you are authentic about it, if you are committed to run these things and teams for the long term. And I also picked from Winnie's presentation this strategic listening and signal detection, because those I can truly underline that that's been the role of communication very much during this recent era. So this was the learnings from our behalf. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kia. I will bring it back to like the overall view. And can I invite Maria and Mona back to our stage? Thank you so much for that presentation. There was lots and lots of nodding in the room. You didn't see that, but there, like it certainly we did a lot of strategic and true listening, lots of recognition. Are there any questions in this moment to Kia or to Maria and Mona from the audience, from the people at home? Please type it in the Q&A. Alex.
Maybe I just come up so you don't have to repeat my question again. So I hope that everybody can hear me here. Thank you, Kia. My question is to you. Great presentation. Very, very topical, very sort of from the day or from what's going on at the moment. With my question, I want to tap into a little bit more of an historical angle to the topic, because I mean, you have decades of experience, not just in communication management, but specifically you've been involved in this ethics topic for a long time, among other things, as a director for ethics and standards in the Global Alliance and other things. So looking at this historically over the time, through the experience that you had, this role of the chief communication director as being also a moral conscience of the business, their boundary spanning role, their ability through listening to also educate, like your point at the end, right? Educate top management on ethical issues. Could you comment a bit how you've seen that develop? Like a lot of that culminates now with some of the crises that we've experienced, but there's a long history to this element of the sort of the Corpcom director, of course, and just some comments on where do you see that coming from to the point we are now, and maybe some predictions of where you see potential for this role in the future. Thank you.
Very, very good question, and a tricky one, of course. I think the role of a communicator has always been to sort of be the messenger of the truth. And so that, of course, has always been there. But when I look back the recent years, I mean, what we can say clearly that the pandemic did a giant leap for digitalization. But I would claim that the pandemic and the war in Ukraine together has made a giant leap in this moral and ethical thinking. across the audiences, and that is what these studies are highlighting in my mind as well. So to put it very brief, so I mean, it's been there, but it's becoming very evident in today's world that is the role we need to take, and that is the sort of those are the expectations we need to fulfill. I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but
that was a great answer. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. I think it's so I have a question of my own, maybe to all of the panelists, because if I listen to this, like coming into this, I thought we were going to talk about like the future skills for communication officers, right? And I think we did, but what I hear, there's a lot of like strategic listening, trust, integrity, courage, that are really like core values. I think you did a great job illustrating, all of you, how important that is. But also, like as an ethics researcher, I know that these things are very difficult to learn, right? So what are we advising people now? Like how do we teach people to learn that courage, or to learn that kind of how, like being a trustworthy person, because I think in the end it might be easier to learn statistics, right? So what are your reflections on that? Like what do we how can we help people with that?
Can I start?
Yeah, of course, please. Yeah.
So quickly thinking, so what we try to do, or what I try to do with my team is, of course, as things are moving on so quickly, so stop and reflect. What did we learn? What can we learn when we think about the radical transparency and the sentiment of our internal audiences? And what is the external study saying? So at least I try to build this contextual knowledge for the full team, so that they know, everybody should be aware that what is the world that we are living in, and then jointly have a dialogue on what is the impact of that, what should we think about in our everyday activities. So a very pragmatic approach.
Kia, I found your presentation extremely interesting, not because I'm from Finland, but but because I think you illustrate a new, let's say, demand of competence in, you know, assuming that communication managers and experts should know exactly what you're pointing out, the moral issues of what's right and wrong. And I think that's extremely difficult. I mean, we need to educate ourselves. We need courses to face these type of issues of what's right and wrong. And I'd like to ask you then, you mentioned that it took you 1 week to decide, you know, to exit Russia. What type of negotiations and discussions and moral issues did you highlight, sort of pro and con? To me, sort of as an outsider, it seems like it should have been an easy decision, but maybe it wasn't.
A very good question, and happy to take that. I mean, the war started on Thursday. On Sunday evening, we got together with the top management to discuss how can we get rid of Russia, how can we do the exit. And we are a very much data-driven company, so we need to understand with the facts what are the implications of our activities. So even though, you know, the ethical mindset was there, it was not a question about that, but it was more to understand that what are the liabilities, what does it actually take? Oh. And this work, the team anticipated that it would take 2 weeks. But they worked night and day, and they made it in 1 week, or actually from the Sunday to next Thursday. So the ethical drive, I would say, was there behind the lawyers, behind those who interpreted our customer contracts, to be able to say, I mean, as a publicly listed company as well, we need to understand the consequences, whether it had the financial impact, short-term, long-term, whatever it was. So it was due to this fact and knowing how how fact-driven we are and data-driven, I'm extremely happy that it went so quickly. It was not about the ethics, it was more about understanding what are the facts behind.